Welcome to GrowthTV, an ACG production. I'm Carolyn Vallejo. Thesis investing demands strategic involvement, and here to talk about what that looks like when done successfully deployed are Michele McHale and Felicia Donaldson, both partners at Plante Moran. Welcome to you both.
Thank you.
Michele, let's start with you. Why is strategic involvement so important in today's economic environment?
Well, I think first we need to step back and kind of define the difference between what we mean in strategic involvement versus financial oversight. So strategic involvement really emphasizes the role of the investors, providing direction and operational execution, helped with the portfolio company monitoring that, and really following through on that investment thesis and tracking it to make sure you're achieving those objectives. It really goes beyond the 100-day plan, because most funds have a 100-day plan that they deploy. And then, what happens after that is also equally as important, and that you're tracking the right metrics, you have the right relationships and clarity with your COOs and CFOs and your management team as to what is trying to be achieved and what the value creation plan is. Whereas financial oversight is more reviewing the financials each month, tracking the KPIs, but not necessarily holding the management team accountable and themselves accountable to tracking, the specific operational efficiencies, customer acquisition, et cetera, types of things they're trying to do to create that value over the whole period.
Felicia, let's turn to you. What does a post-acquisition performance management framework look like?
I really think it involves having a cohesive unit. So really working hand in hand with that private equity shop, along with the CFO, the CEO, and the COO. In order to be successful, all parties have to be aligned. And what I come in after an acquisition has taken place. And when that private equity company shares what that investment thesis is to that C-suite, and they understand what they need to act upon, they're driving the business day to day, running the business. But if you don't know what that exit plan is or what you're trying to create, the value you're trying to add, it makes it very difficult and you can easily go off course. So what I found to, be very successful is when there's alignment, they understand exactly the goals. Those goals are tied to that investment thesis, why you bought the company to begin with, and then give them concrete goals is what I would say. So it's easy to say, hey, reduce waste. Let's say, let's reduce waste, 6 months by 10% from 6 months from the transaction date. Mm-hmm. I always encourage my clients to think about that transaction date as it is day one, right? Day one. Well, where are you? What was the P&L like on that day? We want to try to build the story of the value that you're creating. As you go out and try to expand market share, if that's one of your initiatives, well, how do we tie that back to that EBITDA bridge? Being able to track, the growth, the initiatives, is very important. The accounting and finance team is responsible typically for tracking both financial as well as the operational metrics, but they're not accountable for it, right? We all have to work together. That COO is very important. And I found when that COO and the CFO have a great working relationship and their CFO is able to explain why we're reducing costs and get that person to buy into the plan, you're able to achieve so much more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Let's continue along this thought a little bit because you mentioned how easy it is to go off course. So how can firms be sure that they are properly kind of tracking these KPIs and properly tracking their growth and their progress towards these goals?
To me, that boils down to, do we understand the data that we have? Is that data easily available? If it's available, do we want to invest the resources to track it, right? I think another thing is making sure that you can get the data out quickly. That's very important. So do we have a robust accounting and finance team that's going to be able to give us results so that we can make changes? For instance, with the tariffs, right? Well, I have a client that their focus is industrial products and they spend a lot of time trying to get that buying power and they know, that's who your top 5 vendors are. That's not who you're going to use going forward because we get volume discounts, et cetera. That's something that they did. And now with tariffs, do you really want to be tied to a single vendor? So it's really trying to make sure that you get the information quick enough and that you're able to adjust to whatever is happening at that point in time.
All right, Michele, I'm going to turn back to you to close this out here. Can you tell us a little bit about the role that strategic involvement plays in terms of driving value, as PE firms get ready for an exit?
So being able to tell the story, like the numbers should tell the story. And when, we're helping a company prepare for exit, like in the sell side diligence, you really want to get started early, number one, so you can identify maybe any issues that might come up that you may still have time to fix. And also what strategic involvement I see versus kind of financial oversight, you're not keeping track of some of the things that necessarily are happening or that you thought were happening but really didn't happen. And so how companies sometimes try to solve for that is kind of a little too late in the process. So we're trying to fix and show the value creation through EBITDA adjustments. And we may have a lot of EBITDA adjustments that are either just cost-cutting measures, and they haven't been in place long enough to show that that's actually either sustainable or that you haven't, for instance, cut too deep and, the company can't run the same under that type of cost structure. Or maybe you're doing something with, a different customer contracts or changing some way that you're operating, and we will pro forma those impacts into EBITDA, but you don't have the history to really prove that out to a buyer. And that's where you kind of lose confidence with buyers if you have a lot of adjustments that need a lot of vetting and, a decent amount of your EBITDA is coming through adjustments. I think what that may show to a buyer is that you weren't kind of strategically involved throughout the whole period and are trying to kind of fix things at the end as you exit, which I think really has a negative impact on value.
And I think, Michele, you said it earlier, it's beyond the first 100 days is kind of how I think about it. My team a lot of times set up, this EBITDA bridge so that you can track towards your investment theses, right? You can understand if you're getting the growth or what's working well and what's not working well to be able to adjust. And if you've tracked from day one, which, we always try to say day one is, when you bought the company, what was the P&L to now? You have a nice track record there if you're tracking what your initiatives were, what failed, what worked, why. And I think that makes it so much easier for Michele and her team to be able to present, hey, this is our story. This is how we got here.
The numbers should tell the story at the end of the day when you're going to exit. And of course, there's always going to be things that need to be adjusted for a number of reasons, but it shouldn't be, we're trying to fix things at the end, because if you were doing that throughout the whole period, you would really have a much better story to tell and instill a lot more confidence in buyers.
Got it. Let the numbers tell the story. I love that. Well, Michele and Felicia from Plante Moran, thank you both so much for joining GrowthTV. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.